Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode. Today, we have the pleasure of being joined by Jascelyn Gause. Jascelyn is a content designer at BrainPOP and a former educator who is leading the space in the teacher transition expert category. Jascelyn has a wealth of knowledge and expertise on how to make your transition out of the classroom a true reality. We learned from how Jascelyn made the transition all the way to how she is helping to serve educators today. So we hope that you tune in, make sure you hit the subscribe button, smash the like button, and share with everyone in your network. And we hope that you take some really large takeaways from today's episode on how you can make your transition a true reality. So tune in, turn it up, and as always, let's get ready to do this. Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Leena Marie Saleh, the Edtech Guru. I want to thank you so much for spending time with me on this journey, for all the support that you give me, and for following along. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up button, subscribe, and let's get ready to do this. Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode. Today we are joined by Jascelyn Gause. She is a content designer for BrainPOP. Jascelyn, how are you doing today?
I am awesome, Leena. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm so excited to have you on and share your knowledge with all of our audience and teacher transitioners. So we always like to kick off every episode asking how you got to where you are today.
So that's an interesting story, Leena.
I got time. I'm ready.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't think anybody, comes out of college knowing exactly what they want to do. I think it's always a mystery. I think it is trial and error, and that is kind of what my story is. I grew up, I thought I wanted to be a forensic pathologist. And I thought I wanted to work in a lab. I always tell my daughter, I just kind of wanted to figure out why people died and help their families, and be able to provide answers to a lot of the mysteries that surround some deaths. And when I got to college, I was on that path. I was a forensic science major. And when I got to my last year and I kind of started doing more and more in my field, I was like, these people don't talk. I need to be around people that talk. And so I continued. I got my forensic science degree in chemistry. And then I left school and I started seeing a lot of jobs that had to do with working with kids and or like a psychology position. And those things started to interest me. So I did kind of start off in social work, which I really, really enjoyed. I loved helping families. I loved working with kids. And then I got engaged and I had to move out of the state. And so I did not find a job in social work, but I found a job as a director of our after school program. And so I did a lot of aligning content and creating content for our after school program because my district had very specific needs. They wanted things to help them do well on state testing. And they used a lot of data from their practice tests to be able to figure out what they wanted in the after school program because they wanted to make sure what the kids were doing after school was aligned to what they needed to help them on their tests. So I did a lot of designing content, which I really enjoyed. And I also did a lot of the teaching, which I really enjoyed. So I decided, well, if I'm doing the teaching, I might as well become a teacher. So I went into teaching and I was like, well, of course I'm going to teach science because that's my degree. And I have a passion for science just in general, because it is such a subject that to me, at the beginning of our school, like in elementary, there's not a lot of effort and thought put into it, but it's such an exciting subject and kids really love it. And so I definitely wanted to teach it. So I taught science, eighth grade science I started off with, and then I ended up teaching fifth grade science and social studies. So I did that for 9 years, and probably around my seventh year, I was like, I like this, but I need to do something else because there's so many facets to me, and I want to be able to explore a lot of those things. So that's when I kind of started looking and seeing what else I could do. that combined a lot of the things that I enjoyed, but things I could do outside of education, because I wanted to kind of move in a space that I had never been in before. Everything I had done had been like nonprofit or, education. And I still wanted to be involved with education, but just not in the traditional educational setting. So that's how I kind of started looking outside of the classroom.
That's a great story. And I also love science. I think science is easy for kids to like because it's hands-on learning, where a lot of the other opportunities in the classroom don't necessarily lend itself to like natural hands-on learning. So
Right.
yeah, I also taught science too, and I love it too. So
Oh, yes. Oh,
it's
yes.
exciting.
I
Yeah.
think the biggest shock for me was when I taught eighth grade, and I would tell the students, like, do y'all know that when I was in college, I did more writing than I did like experiments? And they were like, what? And I was like, yes. I was like, because science is great, but I was like, science is two parts. Science is the concepts that you're learning, but then there's also that hands-on piece. And I was like, you do the hands-on piece, but you have to dig deeper into the concepts. And so I did a lot of writing to be able to do that. And so that kind of helped me while I was teaching, and encouraged my students to really, write, because I would tell them, if you love science, like writing is so important to science. And so I would say I would get away with a lot of making them write reports and things like that, because so many of them were interested in science, and they were interested in my experience, and they learned that, that connection was so important.
Yeah, writing is actually, I think, quite undervalued in science. I remember I was having kids do like 5-paragraph essays with like science. It's so easy to do. Like they do an
Mhm.
experiment and you can go through the entire writing process. But if you ever visit any science lab or engineering lab or anything, they have notebooks of data and
Right.
they have to document all of their thinking. And what a better way to tie in that language arts piece that seems to be so exclusively in one subject area into science, where that is how real scientists do their
Yeah.
work.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I feel like I was, I feel like I taught them the importance of a lot of those writing concepts, those things that they in isolation might have thought were boring or challenging, but tying it into science made it fun for them, and they were engaged and wanted to learn.
Yeah. Everybody wants their students to be engaged. And so
Yeah.
that's exactly the dream, right? So you mentioned you've kind of had, a windy path to kind of get where you are. Was there any specific reason outside of just like really wanting something new that like made you want to transition, or you just were kind of hungry for more learning and more opportunity?
So I remember actually sitting in my classroom, and I was creating some tools for us to use on my team. And I was just like, man, like I love my job. I love working with the students, but this is the actual part of my job that I enjoy, because I would sit there, and like sometimes I would sit after, the kids were gone, and I'd sit there for like an hour and a half, 2 hours creating something for the next day. And it was because I was just so into it, and I wanted it to be so engaging and so interactive. And I realized, like, oh my gosh, I've been sitting here working on, a couple of documents that I need for tomorrow or later in the week. And I have like all these other tasks to complete. But that was like the thing that I would hone in on, and really focus on. So knowing that kind of led me to think about, well, if I'm spending a lot of time doing this and I don't really have that time allotted within my day, what is it that I want to do? Because clearly, spending that time, I need to be thinking about how can I take what I love and do that full time. So that's kind of what guided me to where I am today.
Okay. And we talked a little bit about this, but you are, and we'll talk about your process and how you got to where you are, but you are a content designer at BrainPOP. And we were talking about this offline. There are content designers who do the UI, UX, UR, all of that good stuff, like the how you interact with the program. And then there are content designers like the two of us who create educational resources for educators, because we were both in edtech, to utilize in your classroom. So basically what Jascelyn was saying she was doing in her classroom, now she's doing it on a much larger scale than she would have done in the four walls of her classroom. So could you share a little bit about like what a day in the life or day in a week or, looks like for a content designer?
Yeah, sure. So one thing that is important with content design that people don't really realize is it's a lot of independent time. You get your projects, you get your tasks. You might be able to strategize with your team. Maybe you might strategize with somebody on what to do, but there's a lot of individual work time. There's a lot of flexibility in when you complete your task as far as like the time of day, which is important for me. And then there's just a lot of flexibility in how you get your work done, which I really enjoy. So one piece to it is creating that content. And I think for my job, in particular for my team, the other part that we do is we actually edit each other's work, which is very, very important because you get to see things through different lenses. And with teaching, that was a piece that I did not really have. You create a lot of things like for your particular class, maybe for your team, maybe you're even doing it like for the school district, and there's very little editing involved because people trust exactly what you're doing. And the realistic thing is time, right? They don't have a lot of time to be able to edit what you're doing. And so that was kind of a new process for me, like, oh, okay. Well, I have somebody looking at this through a different lens and who can provide feedback through a lens that I might not be able to see. And so a lot of the things that we create, I'm not using it tomorrow. It's not posted on the BrainPOP website, the following day. There are several rounds of editing and revisions that happen before it is actually posted on the website. And so I think that that is so important for people to know when they see these educational resources, especially on BrainPOP. I can say that people have looked at these resources so many times to make sure that it matches the wide range of students and teachers that we serve. And so it's a great thing to see it actually posted because how much it's been through from start to finish.
That is an interesting point of view that I think oftentimes people don't think about is, I mean, you said a lot of great things there, but the independent piece is important, but the team review part is probably one of the most beneficial learning experiences that you can have because you think something is really good and you're like, yeah, I'm going through this. And then
Yep.
somebody doesn't understand actually your perspective and it doesn't make sense to them. So you come together and you explain what you're thinking and they have to explain what you're thinking, they're thinking and what they were getting from it. And together you build something that's going to empower or, educate or whatever the vision is of that resource. But it goes through a very iterative process. Do you guys like for me, I create it, I design it for the most part, and then it goes to our production team, AKA designers who then design it because I'm not a graphic designer. So they kind of obviously I work for Canva too. So it's very particular about the graphics and things that we
Oh,
put
yeah.
out. But do you also have like another team outside of just your content design team that is also supporting you as well?
Oh, yeah. So, the cool thing about BrainPOP is we have movies that are attached to all of our content. So we have a scripts team that actually writes the script. We also have animators that actually do the animation. And so we work a lot with them to make sure that everything is aligned. So from the script to the movie to the content that we produce, it's all aligned to make sure that it's matching the needs of the educators and the students that are using it. And so it is a huge collaboration. It is something that is very cool to see. And honestly, BrainPOP was one of the first EdTech products I used because I taught 8th grade science. And, from teaching science, there's just not a lot out there. And to be on the other side of it and see how all of these things are created is amazing. To see all of the effort that people put in, but not just the effort, to see that people, these people, some of them have never been educators, but they have the love and the joy of wanting to empower students. They have that same love and joy. They've just never been educators before. And so to see other people, just as invested in education, trying to create the content to meet the students and the educators' needs is really nice to see and really nice to be around, especially leaving education.
And it's nice to work with like different perspectives, I think, too. Sometimes the designers or the animators or the dev team or whoever it is that you're working with, they have like the passion, because they wouldn't be working for a tech product if they didn't share that passion. But it's also sometimes they bring a sense, sometimes they humble me and bring me down
Mhm.
because I'm like,
Mhm.
oh, really? Are you sure? And then, you
Mhm.
spend a lot of time explaining, well, this is why we need it this way. And this is what we need. Sometimes they don't see the educator side and sometimes you don't see the other side. And so you have this like meet in the middle part of things. And I think if you can't take feedback, then content designing is not the role for you, because there's a lot
Yes,
of feedback and a lot of people will just rip your stuff apart sometimes, and it's okay, and it's not meant to hurt your feelings. It's just we need to match the mission and the vision for what we're trying to do.
absolutely. I think, Lena, you brought up something really important, which is the feedback piece, because in this particular role, you do have to be able to accept a lot of feedback. You do have to understand criticism, and you have to understand that it's constructive.
Mm-hmm.
So it's meant to build you up, it's meant to build your work, and it's meant to meet the goal that everybody has. And so what you're receiving is not anything negative reflected upon you. It is really with the main goal in mind, no matter who it's coming from. And I think that's something that is, yeah, really important. And sometimes you don't come in understanding how to accept feedback. I think, like, as teachers, a lot of times the feedback that we get is very quick, and it's like, okay, I need you to do this, and then you move on. Like, you have an observation, they leave a note or they write a note. They might not come back for, a couple of weeks to observe.
Or
And when they
years.
observe, yeah, and when they observe, they might not provide guidance on the feedback that they originally left, because now they're honed in on what you're doing on the here and now. Whereas right now, my feedback is about something very specific that I'm working on, and it could be a lot of feedback from several people. And so you have to be able to look at it with an eye of, this is to make sure that, I'm actually meeting the demands of what is needed in those classrooms. And so, yeah, you do have to have, it's not even about having thick skin. I think it's just about understanding the purpose of the feedback that you receive.
I agree, because as teachers, getting the feedback can often feel not constructive. Like it
Right.
seems personal, and because it's your
Mhm.
classroom and you're the one in it and they're never involved, and it's not collaborative like when you're in the workspace. Like I create something, I'm asking for continuous feedback from other people, getting their viewpoints, because at the end of the day, we're not serving 30 little bodies in our classroom or 200 or 400 kids, whatever. We're serving millions,
Right.
millions of users that we need to make sure that it's really, really sound, because it can one go wrong really quickly, but we want to raise the bar, and we're doing all the
Yeah.
hard work for you actually, so that hopefully it makes your lives also easier.
Exactly, exactly. And that, when you keep that in mind, then as you're receiving the feedback, it's not so bad. You're like,
Mm-mm.
oh, it's just to make everything, great for
Yeah.
everybody else. And so, yeah, your mindset definitely has to be different. And just knowing, these are not, like you said, just for my classroom. Like, this is worldwide. People are using this everywhere. So I got to make sure that, when it's presented, it looks like it should be used everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. I just think it's important to open up that window of knowing that it's very collaborative, lots of stakeholders are involved, but it's heavily vetted to when it gets to you, because sometimes I don't know, I was at a conference maybe or something the other day and they're like, well, why can't you just change this feature? It's like, one, it's a lot of money to like do that. It takes a lot of process, and we have to have like, is it just your preference, or is it like a lot of things that
Right.
go into it? And so it can feel very much like, well, it would really benefit me in this way, but like as a company you have to make a decision on what's going to benefit a lot of users. And if there are certain pain points, that we can help with, then we'll obviously iterate and kind of change those things. But I think sometimes we just think it's like this quick oh, well, this worksheet took me like 5 minutes. We have this
Mhm.
misinterpretation about like a teachers pay teachers activity, which probably took somebody a very, very long time to even create, even though it may look
Yep.
simple. Just because you open yourself up to feedback. It's like posting an Instagram reel. Like you never know if somebody's
Yep.
going to be offended, or you worked really hard on it, or maybe spent 5 minutes on it, but you never know how it's going to be received. So that's why we put so much intention behind the work that we do.
Right. 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 Versus, like, not that you don't put intention behind what you do in your classroom, but it's just on a very small scene, small setting. So your lens is very different than, you would have when you're, writing for millions of people, across different continents. It's a little bit different. But I will say the commonality is, the trust that you have in yourself is, the content, like,
Exactly.
and
Like you
so
are the expert.
you are the expert. And
Yeah.
so there is like where you hone in on your skills and you can feel proud and confident in what you're bringing to the table, because you're like, no, I know the content. I know how it needs to be taught. I know what the teachers are looking for. I just need to make sure that it comes across in the way that everybody can use it, not just like how I'm using it in my classroom.
Very, very great perspective. And just an important takeaway, I think, as well. So let's transition a little bit back to, your transition out of the classroom and, your journey that you took. So you knew you were ready for something new and bigger. The job hunting process is not, it's not just like you wake up tomorrow, you throw a resume together and you get a job. Like that's just not, I have known people to have
Yes.
experience, but I would say it's very minimal to the amount of what the actual reality is of it. So what are some steps or tips or tricks, of how you kind of made your transition, I guess, a reality?
Honestly, when you leave education or wanting to leave education, it really takes patience. And it also is going to take some time. Yes, there are people that find a job quickly. Yes, there are people that, can do their resume well, and then boom, 2 months later, they're sitting in a chair doing something completely different. But I think it takes patience as a one thing. Another thing it takes is a lot of reflection, and it also takes a lot of hard work on your part. I remember when I first started transitioning, and I was just like, what is out there? What could I be doing? Where should I go? Who should I talk to? Like I had a lot of questions, and I knew I wanted to leave, but I didn't even know like what possibilities there were. And I was a team leader on my campus. I worked with a customer success manager and with one of the products we worked with. And I just randomly asked him, I'm like, what is it that you do all day? Like, I mean, because I knew how he worked with us, and I knew he was available to us, and I was the one reaching out. And so I was just like, what is it that you do all day? Tell me what your job is. And he started telling me, and then he was like, are you looking to leave education? And I was like, well, maybe, I don't know. And so that his conversation kind of just sparked my interest in just looking outside of education to see what I could do. And I think from there, I did a lot of exploration. I just tried to figure out like, what is it that I like? What are the things about my job that I like that I might want to take into another job? And so one thing that I remember I had my students do was like an acrostic with their name, and they would write like words or little small phrases, for each letter. And that's how like they would share out about themselves. And we normally do it at the beginning of the year and the end of the year, and we would kind of like compare to see if things had changed. And so at the end of the year, students were doing one. I'm like, I should be doing one with them because I feel like I could learn a lot about myself. So I remember getting up for my test, getting to one of the centers with my students. And I sat there and I had my paper and I had my little color pencils and I was doing the different colors and I'm writing my words. And I was like, wow, I'm learning a lot about myself just from doing this, things I never thought about. And so that kind of led me to start thinking, well, what else is out there with what I like to do? So I would have like my paper with my name and all these different things on there. And I would like have that every time I sat down and looked at different jobs. And I think one thing I started to notice was that when you want to leave education, there's like a narrow list of things. It's like customer success, project management, implementation specialist, BDR. They're, just 5 or 6 different things. And then I start to think to myself, I'm like, well, how do people become like a financial analyst or like just different jobs that are not on this list? Because the reality is we try to, in education, I feel like we don't want to limit our students. We tell our students there are lots of possibilities. But like when we start thinking about leaving, we put ourselves in this box, like I should be doing customer success because like I'd be great at that. I should only work at Edtech because that's a great transition. I know about education. I would just need to learn the tech side, or I would just need to learn this aspect. And so we try to start connecting what we previously did to a new job. But I actually don't think that's the case. I feel like just because we feel like we're good at this, we're also kind of limiting ourselves. And it's like if we took what we tell our students and the whole mindset of anything that's possible and we applied it to ourselves, we would see that there are so many things open for us, you know. And I also think of like people saying, you know, oh, well, I only have this experience as an educator. Well, when you say only, you're limiting yourself, you know, versus like, this is what I know I'm good at. I can take this and do this anywhere. Then you change that mindset and you change how you present yourself. And so like those are the things I was working on as I was like doing my exploration. It's like, oh, I found out like this is not just about what job I want to be. This is about me finding out how to basically sell myself, how to change my mindset, how to understand that, yes, I'm a teacher, but that's just a hat that I'm wearing. That doesn't describe me as a person and it doesn't define my skill set. And so like those are the things I was working on learning. And so I hear people talk about like wanting to leave education quickly, and I definitely understand that. But I also like see the benefit in like taking a little bit of time and really like exploring the things you like and trying to figure out where could be your next best fit, because then you're not limited to the 5 or 6 jobs you see everybody talking about online. You start thinking about, oh my gosh, I could work at a museum, or I could work, you know, like the possibilities are endless. And so if you have that time or you want to devote that time to yourself, I definitely, you know, preach that you should do that. And it doesn't mean that your next job is going to be your forever job. It just means that the next job or role that you get is going to be very specific to what you want to do at that time.
Yeah. And I think, and I just had Timothy Lowe, he has a
Oh
career
yeah, love
and
him.
resume services center. And we were just talking about that, like how your next job, there's so many people that I've coached and they're like, oh, you know, this is going to be my forever job. And I think we're conditioned as educators to think that this is your forever job, but like it's not. And the jump outside of the classroom is a challenging one, just because you're learning about yourself. You're learning how to sell yourself. You're learning all these skills and strategies you don't need for teaching, because you can walk into a teaching interview in any
Yep.
district in any state and speak to whatever. You have the experiences, they're in your pocket. You probably don't even need to study the interview questions. Like there's
Yep.
nothing like that. But when you move into the corporate space of whatever niche you decide you want to land in, you have to identify your skills, understand it. And as teachers, we learn, we do 1,000 things. And it doesn't mean we like 1,000 things, but we
Mm-hmm.
do, we are an organization of one person, that we do
Mm-hmm.
everything. We're the CEO, we're the CTO, we're the, you know, the financial officer, we're doing our
Yep.
own budgeting, we're doing everything. But that's not good when doing a job hunt and a job
Right.
strategy and a job search. You do need to take the time and identify and just sit down with yourself. It could be an acrostic poem. It could be a mood board. Who
Mm-hmm.
cares what it is? Honestly, whatever it is that's your style, you could journal, I don't know, bullet journal, do whatever it is that you feel like you need to do, but you need to identify the things that you love. And it doesn't need to just be about your day-to-day work. It should be
Mm-mm.
including all the things you like in life. Like,
You
are
as a
you
person.
regimented with fitness? Are you,
Mm-hmm.
do you like traveling? Like, what are the things that you really enjoy? Because that can also pull you in a direction. Let's say you really are just like an avid traveler. That's like what you want to do. Who knows? You could be working for Expedia. You could be doing all these other
Yep.
things. There are lots of opportunities. There are so many jobs that you don't even know about. And as teachers, we have no idea. We're like, so we know about 5 roles, because when you search what jobs are good for teachers, those are the
Yep.
5 roles that come up. But there is
Yep.
an infinite amount of possibilities for you. And I think by doing an audit internally
Yeah.
first, then it will give you guidance on what to go outwards. And you don't just need to stick with just ed tech. I know that that's what a lot of people, that's my passion. So like, that's where
Right.
I land. Like I could not, I've loved ed tech from as long as I can remember, but that's not necessarily always the case for a lot of people. Like I have friends
Right.
that went into recruiting. I have friends that work in health tech and fintech and like all kinds of like other areas of life. So if you don't do that, then you're going to have 19 resumes, 19 pathways of your job hunting field. Obviously not 19, but there are people
Absolutely.
who have had those things sent to
Yes.
them.
And you're going
Here's
to be
19
out there.
attachments. I'm like,
Yeah.
you
And
got
you're
to
going to
be
be
really
wondering
tired.
like aimlessly,
Yeah.
because when I first left, I was just like out there, like, I don't know what it is. I'm just like reaching for something because
Yeah.
I know I'm trying to do something else. I just don't know. And like you said, once you like kind of narrow, it really, really helps you focus on things to say, boom, these are the types of jobs I'm going to go for. You might not know what field you want, but at least you know like the titles that you could go for. And so that is really important, because you don't want to be writing 500 resumes for all the different jobs you want.
No, you don't. And you're going to burn yourself out before you even get started. And that's just like,
Oh yeah.
that's why we always say that. I know people are like, oh, you're beating, dead horse. It's like, no, I'm not. I'm telling you this because this is what everybody does. They do it. And I did it. I applied to like everything and anything. Like I just thrown my name out there, my resume everywhere. And of course I didn't get any callbacks because I have no direction myself. Like and when they call me and they're like, why should we hire you? And I'm like, that's a good question. I actually am not sure how I can fit in this role because I don't even remember what this role is or what it's for because I just
I
applied to
don't even know
1,900
like what
jobs.
I would be doing to help you.
Yeah. That's embarrassing, but it's the truth.
Yes, the truth.
Yeah. So I think I think having a direction is just really important, underutilized, under processed part. But we were talking actually before we hit record about there is this second piece. Teachers spend so much time, obviously, figuring out, front loading. Hopefully you're doing that. And then you get to the interview and you don't do well. Like, I don't know, you have the first initial recruiter call, which is about 15 minutes. So they're not going to learn too much about you. They're asking some questions and scoring you on a rubric. It's really what they're doing. And then they pass you off and you go into the interview. And when you get to the interview and people are, asking for how you can fit into this role, while an educator, people get this like imposter syndrome. Like, I don't have any skills that can fit in this role.
Right.
You do. You have to tell it through the scenario of the job and how you could fit that role. And you have to sell yourself.
Absolutely. And you also, I think the hardest part is that we lean so much on that teaching experience. And I think we don't always realize that people that have not taught, that have been in corporate, they don't always use only corporate experience because there's so much to you. And I think that's important for when you're interviewing, that they see like those multifaceted sides of what you are, who you are, and what you can bring to the table. I think sometimes, when we're interviewing, it's like, oh, it's just easy to just talk about something I've did in teaching and try to relate that to what they're looking for. But that doesn't really give them a sense of who you really are. And it also doesn't give them a sense of like what you've done outside of teaching. And so, I have this question comes through my messages a lot on LinkedIn. I've only been a teacher. I don't have any other experience. And it's like, yes, you do have other experience, have you volunteered somewhere? Have you worked, like I was in a sorority and, what have you done, maybe in a community group or a sorority? Have you led something? Have you been in control of some type of project? I even have talked about being a parent and just like, how that has shaped me as a person. And to me, that gives them a wide range to see you in, a wide lens, because if you just talk about your teaching experience, they only know you as that. And so when they bring up your name, that's what they're going to think about. So-and-so, the teacher, and I didn't want them to say, oh, that's Jascelyn, the one that used to be the teacher. I just wanted them to look at me as Jascelyn, and because there's so much to me besides teaching. And I'm like, if you don't present yourself as just a person and just who you are, then that's how they're going to receive you. They're going to receive you just as you present yourself. And so learning how to actually market yourself and sell yourself in the way that you want to be seen is so important. I remember you saying you used to record yourself, and I laughed because I was like, oh my gosh, I used to do that too, and just simply recording yourself, answering questions to things and going back and listening. Well, did I answer that question? Did I sound like I was competent? Did I sound like I kind of understood what I was saying? What type of example did I provide? Did I give enough detail? It's almost as if like what we're looking for with our students, did they actually answer the question that's asked? Did they provide the evidence? It's the same type thing. We're doing the same thing, except for it's in an interview and we're worried about marketing ourselves. So really, really figuring out how you want to present yourself and the way you want to present yourself is extremely important. If you don't want to be just known as a teacher, you can't present yourself as just a teacher. And yes, that starts on your resume, but that's extended through your interview. and through the networking that you're doing, you're constantly presenting yourself in the way that you want to be seen. You want people to know you maybe for your strengths, how you can be beneficial to a company. And that's not just through teaching, not just through your teaching experience. So I had to spend a lot of time figuring out how I wanted to portray myself. And that did not come from talking to a lot of people. That didn't come from necessarily doing research about it. That actually came from me practicing and doing some reflection.
Yeah. And reflection is just important. And yeah. And we were talking about how I used to record myself offline before interviews because I'd be so nervous. And people would always say, always, when I was student teaching, they said, you need to be careful of your RBF face because it's really going to turn people off. And I'm like, okay. So then I started practicing being more animated and being like, yeah, I'm really into this. And I'm so jazzed, and make sure I throw a smile in there as much as I can. And like, I would even write down, I would always bring like a paper into the teacher interviews, and I'd always be like, okay. And I'd write a break in there, like smile, ask a question. So then I would like look like I'm naturally paused, so I would look like I was more probably jazzed up than I was at the time. But it also gives me a reset to like not be so nervous or that sort of a thing. You mentioned something that I thought about when you were talking, and that's like, you're not just a teacher, like there is so much facets to you. But if you feel like as you're going through this process, you're recording yourself, you're asking these questions, and you're like, you can't feel like you can't get beyond that. Just a teacher. I always suggest there are hundreds of teaching groups. There are a million ways that you can volunteer to like represent something, do a fundraiser at your child's school. I don't know, do anything to like show that you have some initiative, that you ran a project, you completed it. It could be a community garage sale, it could be a group cleanup. It could be literally the sky is the limit, but that gives you another opportunity to speak to a different experience that's just not teaching. And I think that you have them, you just don't think about them as the opportunity. Like so many people, like somebody was like, oh, I used to organize and run the school play. And it's like, why don't you talk about that? There's financial stuff you added there. There is marketing that you did with that piece of it. You had to put butts in seats. You had to organize the students. You probably like crafted and rewrote the play in some capacity. Like there's so much things that we do that we think, oh, we're just a teacher. It's like, we do a lot of stuff. We do duty, we organize, we do after school enrichment programs, we launch programs. Maybe you're in EdTech. We just had an interview and somebody has worked with a lot of EdTech providers, but didn't speak to that in an EdTech interview. And it's like, that's your missed opportunity. Like you didn't say how you've worked with vendors, or you said you went to your customer success manager that worked with you for your EdTech product. And you're like, hey, what does a day in a life look like for you? So that means that you've been part of a rollout process. You've probably done some training for teachers and educators. How many did you do it for? How long? How many sessions? How often? These are all things that you've done. You could speak to. You could call your students clients. Nobody cares. The person that's interviewing you 9 times out of 10 has never been an educator. More than likely, if they have, then it's okay to play to those like opportunities. But most people don't know how much teachers do, really. They say it, they feel it, they tweet about it, but they don't know.
Absolutely. I feel like this is why a lot of times people will get the interviews, but they won't land the role because they cannot translate their experience. They cannot articulate what it is that they have done and how they'll be a good fit for the role. You can just literally just list off what you've done. And that is a mistake that people make in their resume. And then sometimes they carry over that into the interview. It's just a list of the things that they've done, but they can't like connect it. And so honestly, you want to do it generally in that thinking like, okay, how would I answer these questions? But then you also want to tailor it to be very, very specific when you get those interviews to that particular company, that particular role, and thinking about, wow, what could I say to actually sell myself for this position? What part of my experience do I need to hone in on? Not just teaching as a whole, not just running an after school program as a whole. Is it the part that the fact that I was able to, do all of our budgeting because I was the after school coordinator? Is it the part that I did all of the hiring and the evaluation for the staff. Like, you got to pick and choose the task that really relates to what you're trying to do. And I think like that's also an error that we see a lot of teachers. It's like, well, I do a lot. I'm going to put all this on the resume, or I want to talk about all this.
Like,
Well,
don't.
yes, we do a
Yeah.
lot, and that is
Yeah.
actually the truth. However, that's always not beneficial to where we're going next. You know, somebody asked me like how my job now is different than being a teacher, and I said, the one thing about my job now is it allows me to really take one piece of teaching that I really love and dig deeper, versus when I was teaching, I had a lot of things that I was trying to manage, but I couldn't go really deep with them in the way that I wanted to. And so it's kind of helped me like narrow in and learn a lot more. And I think that's like a big difference when you leave teaching. You're going to see that you're going to be a little bit more restricted to one or two areas of focus, but you're going to learn a lot more about those areas of focus.
Yeah. And you become really specialized. Yeah. It's just reminding me like every year at the beginning of the year, I'd be like, I'm going to be way more prepared. I'm going to know all the content before the beginning of the year. And every year I never was. I was always scrambling, trying to get like I knew the content, but I didn't know the lesson as much as I should, because there's zero time to be able to do that and do it well, unless you stay in the same grade level, the same school for your entire teaching career, 20 years or something. You probably know it like the back of your hand because you've been doing it all the time. But I think you hit on something really well, is you are taking those skills that you loved and the things that you loved about teaching, and you get to dial it down and spend intentional time really learning that skill or strategy or whatever you loved, and really become like, I think I'm not going to go back to teaching anytime soon. At least I'm not going to say never, but but I think if I were to go back into teaching and I would go into the district level and maybe lead some professional development or something, I think I would be way better today than I would have ever been if I would have stayed in the classroom, because the opportunities I've had now to think critically, to dive deep,
Right.
receive constructive feedback, and go through those loops. I would have never asked for feedback, probably. Like, I would have maybe been like, hey, do you think this is good? But not constructive, deep feedback loops that like we don't get the opportunity to do.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I think it's something that they want you to do. I think it's one of those things where it's like just kind of thrown on your task list. And it's like, however you can get it done, but you really don't do it in the way that it should be because you don't have the time to do it, you
You
know?
also don't know any different, I think, also.
Right, right,
Like, we're always on fire as
right.
educators.
Absolutely. And you don't get the desired result or the outcome that you should, because it's like you're constantly moving. Something's always going on to where it's taking you from the one task that you really need to spend time on, or you're like, I can only allot 15 minutes to this today because I don't have time. I got to do X, Y, and Z. And I find myself doing that a lot, especially towards the end, because I was balancing being a team leader with also teaching at the same time. It was like, I only have time to do this for 20 minutes, like, because I have all these other responsibilities, even though I know that this is important and I know that I need to spend time on this, and I know that if I did this I could increase the bar for my students exponentially. But I also have all these other tasks and I still have to go home and be with my family. So I do think that there are a lot of things that are beneficial for teachers, and they tasks that are great to help teachers, but the time to get them done is just and I feel like really going into doing a deep dive into things that you enjoy would be beneficial. Like, if teachers had time to do that, it'd be beneficial and it'd be helpful, especially as you think about like what else you're good at besides, just teaching the content.
Yeah, I agree. And I always preach that, this for another time, but I always preach that we don't hone in on the capacity, like in the right ways of the teaching. And that would
Oh
probably
no.
change everything that we do. Right.
Oh yeah.
So you and I got connected through the power of LinkedIn, and Jascelyn just revealed some really sad news to me that her group on Volley is no longer there. It's called Evolving Educators. And that's because Volley is no longer around. So
Yeah, Molly is no longer around. So I had a group we started in November 2021. And I kind of started it just because, at the time there wasn't, to me, I just not finding like a lot of free support. And I was just like, when people are thinking about leaving teaching before they pay anything, it's like you just want somewhere to explore and maybe get a few resources and get your mind working and get you brainstorming. So I started my group on Volley and it was great. I ended up having about 700 people that were active throughout the time that I had it. And unfortunately, Volley shut down in just actually April 30th. And so I kind of beforehand spent a little time doing some research, like what else is out there? Let me see what other people are doing. Found a lot of groups. And so I decided to just like really shut mine down and instead of move it to a different space and really, just give myself time to kind of nurture myself, think about other things because, you know, I just expanded my family. So I have 2 kids now. So I'm like, let me kind of spend time with myself and really think about things that I enjoy. But I still will be posting on LinkedIn. I have not posted in a little while because, I've been adjusting to being a mom of 2, which is a lot.
Understandable. Yeah.
But I'm still gonna start posting on LinkedIn again because that is something that I really enjoy doing. And then I also am gonna be doing things like this where I can reach a lot of people as best as I can and just provide another resource for them. Because actually, something that I did do a lot was listen to podcasts when I was trying to transition. And so I would be like at bus duty and I'd have my little AirPod in and I'd be listening to something, and I'm telling the kids, hey, get on bus 139. Come on. And like, still
Yep.
listening to things, or I'd be working on my content and listening to a podcast, or I'd be driving home listening to a podcast. And so these are really important for me to do because they helped me in so many different ways. So definitely doing things like this and reaching people on a larger scale are things that I can manage right now.
And I think everyone has to give themselves the time and the space to do, whatever. So it feels like Volley, the end of Volley was a good thing for you on a personal level and
Yeah.
will allow you to do some different explorations of different types of ways to get back. But if you're not already following her, we'll have that down in the show notes. So we definitely recommend it because
Thank
she
you.
has lots of good nuggets that you definitely don't want to miss out on.
Thank
So
you.
we always like to close out the interviews with, if you were to give 1 tip, 5 tips, what would be your top tip for a teacher who's looking to transition out of the classroom?
Trust yourself and be confident. I think that encompasses a lot of things and can support you in a lot of different ways. I think trusting yourself and knowing that you are good enough, you knowing that you will land something else, and knowing that the process is worth it, being confident in your skills, being confident in knowing that you can land something that is good for you, and being confident that you're multifaceted. Like you're not going to be defined by one thing. And as you start to see yourself like that, other people will start to see you like that. And so even though those are very abstract, they're very good things to really lean into as you are trying to transition. And then just know that there's like no magical equation to make it happen. You can have the best resume, you can network with the best of the best people, you can have everything in line, and you still may not transition. It's sad, but it's also a realistic thing to think about. Things are going to take a lot longer than you think. When I was coming out, I was like, oh man, I'm on a timeline because I am a planner. I'm like, I'm on a timeline. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And then I'm going to be gone by this date. And I've got to have this in line. And it just didn't work out like that. And, being realistic in the sense of knowing that it's probably not going to work on your time. So you got to start thinking about, well, what is it that I'm going to do? Am I going to stay here? Am I going to think about breaking my contract? Am I going to, what is it that you're going to do if you don't meet your goals? And understand that it's okay not to meet your goals because there's so many different variables that go into you transitioning. So you could have the best of everything and it's not you, it's the market. Or you could have the best of everything, but there's one piece like interviewing that you might need to work on. So, just knowing that nothing is magical. Like I can't just tell you, or nobody can tell you A plus B will get you C. As much as we want that as teachers, It just is not going to happen like that. So that's where that trust and confidence really comes in, because when you're in the trenches and you're at a really low point, you need that. You definitely need that. That's like your backbone. And I guess the last thing I would say is like, get a community, get people that you can literally send a message to on LinkedIn or text and be like, oh, I'm having a hard day, or, hey, I need help interviewing. Can you like watch my videos, or can we hop on Zoom and like, you ask me some questions, I give the answers, and you provide me some feedback. People that really will be in the trenches with you and support you while you're going through this. I have two really good friends where we're in a group and we message each other on LinkedIn a lot. We check on each other. We transitioned around the same time. We support each other. One of us has already transitioned to a different role. And so it's like, it's really good to have that support. It's helpful. And when you're at a low point, you have somebody there that you're like, oh, I'm not alone, or, you're in a high point and you're like, oh, I have somebody to celebrate with. So you have people, and then you have those times where you might want to say some things, that you don't necessarily need to put on LinkedIn in front of everybody, but you can send a message and just say, oh, can I just rant or vent about this today? And you have those people that that you can trust. And so building like a small team of support is extremely helpful. And it's not just about networking. It's just about having people there when you need them, or you being there when somebody else needs you. That I think has been the best thing for me during the process. Because believe it or not, you still need people after you transition.
You do.
Well,
And you still
you
need
still
venting
yeah,
partners as well, because
absolutely.
that doesn't ever go away. And I found that the people that I transitioned with or leaned in on have become some of my greatest supporters and, really great friends along the process too. So, because you can be vulnerable with one another and in a way that other people wouldn't understand.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And don't necessarily turn people down because you're like, oh, well, they're still educators too. Like I've met people that, are like, oh, well, when I was still an educator, oh, well, you're still an educator, so I don't want to connect with you. And it's like, but you never know where people are gonna land,
That's so
like
rude.
some educators are now recruiters and some
Yeah.
are hiring managers, so it's just like
Yeah.
you can't just be stuck in one solid moment of time and then, not thinking that these people are going to land somewhere. So, being supportive for everybody and, really connecting with everybody and networking with all sorts of people, not just transitioning teachers, not just people in ed tech. Like I network with people that I just like the content that they write. Maybe they
Mm-hmm.
write about, being positive. There's one person I'm connected with. She writes a lot about mental health. She was never an educator, but we network so much. Networking is not just to get you where you think you want to be. Networking is so that you can just build your community of people, of like-minded people that you can look at their post or reach out to them and they can, help you during your time of need, or you can be there for them during their time of need. So that's really, really important.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, I've really, really enjoyed this interview and getting to jam with you on the teacher transition process. It's one of my favorites, and, just getting to know you a little bit more. We will make sure to link all of her LinkedIn down below, her website, all of those goodies as well. But if you're watching this, we really hope you connect with her and with myself if you're not already doing that, and make sure you throw your comments down below. And we're just so thankful for you and for you coming on today.
Yes, thank you, Leena. This has been awesome.
All right, everybody. We'll see you guys next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye.